It started with a cry. A small boy, no older than 6, stood frozen in the middle of a quiet town square. His clothes were torn, his face streaked with dirt and tears. He clutched a worn-out teddy bear like it was the only thing keeping him from breaking apart. With a trembling finger, he pointed at a public trash bin in the center of the street. "Please," he begged, voice cracking, "you have to believe me. My mum's locked inside. Please save her." People passed by. Some glanced, some shook their heads. A woman whispered to her husband, "Poor thing." Probably imagining things. An old man tapped the bin with his cane. "Impossible," he said. "Just garbage in there." No one stopped. No one lifted the lid, except one man. Alexander Harris, though he now went by Alexander Knight, stepped out of a sleek black Bentley. He was a millionaire. A man used to silence when he entered a room, to respect served with distance. His charcoal grey suit fit perfectly. His polished shoes touched the pavement like a man who didn't belong here. This was just a stop on a business trip, a brief pause in a life built on power, deals, and cold logic. He was heading to a cafe to meet a partner when the boy's scream cut through the air. It wasn't just loud. It was raw, desperate, the kind of cry that doesn't ask for help, it begs for survival. Alexander paused. The boy ran to him, tiny hands grabbing the expensive fabric of his jacket. "Mister, please, she's in there. They won't listen. You have to believe me." Alexander frowned. He pulled the boy's hands away. "Go find your family. Don't cling to me." He walked away. Behind him, the crying grew louder, more broken. A few people laughed. "Just wants attention." "Probably made it up." Alexander pushed into the cafe, sat down, ordered coffee, but he couldn't lift the cup. The boy's face stayed in his mind. Those wide, wet eyes. That look, not of a lying child, but of someone watching hope die. That night, alone in his mansion, the silence felt heavier than usual. He poured a glass of whiskey, tried to forget, but the boy's voice echoed. "My mum is in there." He closed his eyes and saw himself, not as a millionaire, not as a man in control, but as an 8-year-old boy standing in a crowd, screaming for help, and no one stopping, no one believing. The memory hit like a punch. He jolted awake, heart racing, sweat on his forehead. That boy, Daniel, wasn't just some stranger. He was a mirror. And in that moment, something cracked inside Alexander. Not guilt, not pity, something deeper. A buried part of himself, long silenced, stirred awake. Compassion. The next morning he drove back. The alley was worse in daylight. Damp, smelling of rot. Puddles of dirty water reflected the grey sky. And there, still beside the trash bin, sat Daniel. He hadn't moved all night. His face was pale. His thin shoulders shook with cold and exhaustion. His eyes were swollen, barely open. But he was still there, still watching the bin, still waiting. When he saw Alexander's car, he scrambled to his feet, weak, barely able to stand, but he ran. "You came back," he whispered, voice hoarse. Alexander stepped out. The boy didn't beg, he clung, like a drowning child grabbing a lifeline. "Please," Daniel said, "save my mum. I don't have anyone else." Alexander looked down, at the boy, at the bin, at the world that had walked away, and for the first time in years he didn't think, he acted. He dropped to one knee, looked the child in the eyes. "All right," he said, voice low but steady. "I'll call someone, but you stay calm." Daniel's breath caught. You believe me." Alexander didn't answer with words. He pulled out his phone, dialed the sheriff. "Harris, it's me. Send someone now. There's a chance someone's locked in a dumpster at the town square. Check it, now." No small talk, no hesitation. He hung up. Then he turned back to Daniel. "They're coming. If you believe she's in there, then I believe you." The boy broke. Not quietly, not in whispers. He sobbed, deep, shaking, unstoppable. The kind of cry that comes after hours of holding everything in. Alexander didn't know it then. But that moment, when he chose to believe, would change everything. Sirens wailed in the distance. A crowd gathered. The sheriff arrived, annoyed, skeptical. Officers tapped the bin. Nothing. They turned to leave. Daniel screamed, "Mum, can you hear me?" And then, faint, weak, but real, came a sound. Clunk, clunk, a knock from inside. The officers froze, pressed their ears to the metal. Another knock. This wasn't a prank. This was real. They pried the lid open. And the smell hit first. Not just garbage, something worse. Damp, rotten. The smell of fear. Inside, buried under trash, was a woman. Clara Thorne. Her face was swollen, her dress torn, rope burns on her wrists, blood in her hair, but she was breathing. Daniel screamed, "Mum," and lunged forward, hands reaching. She stirred, one eye cracked open, lips moved. "Dan Eel," the ambulance came. The crowd erupted, some cried. Some turned away, sickened. Alexander stood still. He had almost walked away. If he hadn't turned back, she would have died in that bin. The weight of that truth settled on his chest like stone. At the hospital, Daniel fell asleep against Alexander's side, still clutching the teddy bear. 3 hours passed, no word. Then the doctor came. "She's out of immediate danger, dehydration, hypothermia, severe bruising, but she'll survive." Daniel woke, burst into tears, this time from relief. Alexander didn't smile. He placed a hand on the boy's head, a small gesture. But it meant something. Later, Clara gave her statement. It was her brother, Marcus. He had tricked her, made her sign papers she didn't read, told her it was for help. It was actually a full transfer of her house, her savings, everything. When she refused, he attacked her, drugged her, locked her in the dumpster, and threatened to hurt Daniel if she told anyone. Alexander listened, and fury built inside him. This wasn't just a crime, it was betrayal, pure evil. He looked at Daniel, at Clara, and made a promise, not out loud but deep in his chest. He wouldn't let this end here. He would fight. But the next day the world turned against them. Marcus went on TV, sat across from a famous host, spoke with tears in his eyes, said Clara was sick, delusional, that she believed people were after her, said he was only trying to help. A so-called expert backed him up, claimed her behavior was classic of mental illness. The story flipped. Now Clara wasn't a victim. She was unstable, dangerous. And Daniel, social services, took him. They said he couldn't stay with his mother. Alexander watched it happen. He felt helpless. But he wasn't done. He called his attorney, hired a private investigator, ordered every document rechecked. And then Daniel mentioned something about the teddy bear. His mother had sewn a secret into it. "She said Teddy was keeping a secret for me," Daniel whispered. "No matter what, I mustn't let them take him." Alexander took the bear. Carefully, he pulled the stitches. Inside, wrapped in plastic, was a USB drive. He plugged it in. One file, for Daniel MP3 static. Then Clara's voice. Marcus, you can't do this. That belongs to Daniel. Then Marcus's voice, cold, threatening, shut up. Both you and that brat are nothing but dead weight. Sign it, or you'll die in the filth I'll have you thrown where no one finds you. Alexander froze. This was it, proof. But he knew Marcus had money, power, a slick lawyer. This recording, it might not be enough. So the real fight began, not in the streets, not in headlines, but in court. The courtroom was packed, every seat taken, every inch of space filled with tension, breath held, eyes locked on one man, Marcus Thorne. He sat across the aisle, straight-backed, calm, wearing a soft grey sweater instead of a suit, his hair neatly combed, his face carefully composed, just enough sorrow in his eyes to look like a man carrying the weight of family tragedy. Beside him, David Chen, his slick, silver-tongued lawyer, adjusted his tie and smirked at the jury like he already knew the ending. Alexander sat in the front row. No flashy suit today, just a plain dark jacket. His hands rested on his knees, fingers curled slightly, not clenched, not relaxed, ready. Clara was there too, pale, thin, still healing, but her eyes, sharp, clear, full of fire, never left her brother. And Daniel, he sat between Alexander and Clara, gripping his teddy bear so tightly the threadbare arm dangled loose. He didn't speak. He didn't cry. He just watched. Because he remembered, that night, the shouting, the hands grabbing his mother, the way Marcus's voice turned from calm to cruel in one breath. And now, finally, the truth had a chance to speak. The trial began with Chen. He stood, smooth as oil, and painted a picture. Clara, a grieving widow. Broken by loss, paralyzed by fear, a woman who imagined enemies everywhere, even in her own brother. He waved medical reports, neighbor statements, a so-called expert who said Clara had a history of delusions. She believed people were stealing from her, Chen said. She locked her doors at night. Screamed at shadows. This wasn't crime, it was illness. The room murmured. Some nodded. Some looked at Clara with pity. Alexander felt his chest tighten. This wasn't just a trial, it was a lie being dressed up as mercy. Then David Tran, Alexander's lawyer, rose, calm, measured, no theatrics. He called the first witness, Sarah Miller, a young nurse, small frame, nervous hands, but when she spoke, her voice didn't shake. She told the court about the morning Clara brought Daniel in for a checkup, about the man in the hallway, well-dressed, insistent, about the argument. I heard him say, "You have to sign those papers, don't be stubborn." She paused. I saw her face. She was terrified. Chen jumped up. Objection, hearsay. She didn't hear the full conversation. The judge allowed it, but the seed was planted. Doubt. Then came the sound expert. Miller, quiet, focused, wearing thick glasses, explained the recording. No edits, no splicing. The background noise matched Clara's house, the phone used, a cheap model she owned. It's real, Miller said, and it was recorded the night she disappeared. Tran stood. Held up the USB drive in a clear evidence bag. This, he said, was hidden in Daniel's teddy bear, sewn in by Clara the night before she was taken, a message, a warning, a mother's last act to protect her child. The room went still. Tran turned on the recording, silence, then static. And Clara's voice. Marcus, you can't do this. That belongs to Daniel. A gasp rippled through the crowd. Then Marcus's voice, cold, threatening. Shut up. Both you and that brat are nothing but dead weight. Sign it, or you'll die in the filth. I'll have you thrown where no one finds you." The words hung in the air, sharp, ugly, real. People looked at Marcus. He stared at the floor, sweat glistened on his forehead. Chen tried to fight back, called the recording a setup, said Clara was unstable, that she provoked Marcus, but the damage was done. Then Harris took the stand. He laid out the proof: gambling debts, loan sharks, IOUs signed in Marcus's handwriting, over $300,000 owed, and the day after Clara vanished, he withdrew $20,000 from her account. Motive, Harris said. He didn't care about his sister, he cared about her money. The jury shifted. Some leaned forward, some glanced at Marcus like they were seeing him for the first time, and then Daniel stood up. No one told him to, no one expected it. He just rose, small, shaking, but his voice, when it came, was clear. "I saw it," he said. "That night I was under the bed. I saw Uncle Marcus hit Mum. I saw him drag her away. I heard him say she'd rot in the trash." His breath caught. Tears fell. "But I didn't run. I stayed. I waited. I knew she was still alive." He looked at Marcus. "You tore my bear. You left it on the fence. You wanted to scare me." "But I'm not scared anymore." The courtroom broke, not with noise, with silence. Then sobs, shouts, people standing cursing Marcus. The judge pounded the gavel, but nothing could stop what had already happened. The truth had won, not because of money, not because of power, because a child spoke. And someone finally listened. Marcus was taken away in handcuffs. No more mask, no more lies. Just a broken man, head down, being led out of the life he'd built on betrayal. Outside, the town erupted, not with celebration, with relief. Clara stepped out of the courthouse, leaning on Alexander's arm. Daniel ran ahead, laughing, spinning in the sunlight, the same square where he'd cried for help. Now he danced. A month later, Marcus was sentenced. 20 years. No parole. The headlines read, "The brother who stole everything." And Clara, she stood in front of the town, microphone in hand, not for revenge, not for fame, just to say one thing. "I don't need apologies. I don't need money. I just want every child to know, when you speak, someone should listen." The crowd stood, applauded, some cried, because they remembered. They had walked past that boy, they had called him a liar, they had done nothing. Now they couldn't look away. As for Alexander, he didn't return to his mansion that night. He stayed, with Daniel, with Clara, in a small rented house, far from luxury, far from silence. That night he tucked Daniel into bed. The boy looked up. "Can I call you Dad?" Alexander froze, not from shock, from feeling. Because for the first time in his life, he wasn't just a man with a name, a bank account, a title. He was someone's father. He knelt beside the bed, placed a hand on Daniel's head. "If you want to," he said, voice low, "I'd be honored." Daniel smiled, closed his eyes, and slept safe. The next morning, Alexander signed the papers. Temporary guardianship, but it didn't feel temporary. It felt like coming home. They walked through the town square again. Daniel held Alexander's hand. Clara walked beside them. No one stared, no one whispered. They just smiled, because the story had changed, not just for them, for everyone. And in that moment, Alexander understood something. He hadn't saved Daniel. Daniel had saved him from a life of cold success, from a heart locked away, from becoming the kind of man who walks past a crying child. All it took was one decision: to turn the car around, to believe, to listen. Not to a headline, not to a rumor, but to a trembling voice, a small hand. A worn-out teddy bear. That's where courage starts. Not in grand speeches, not in armies, in the quiet choice to care, to act, to say, I see you, I believe you, I'm here. Because sometimes the loudest truth comes from the smallest voice. And when we finally listen, the world changes. The town changed, not all at once, but slowly, like frost melting under the first real sun of spring. People who once walked fast, eyes down, now stopped to talk, to listen, to look each other in the face. The square, where Daniel had cried, where no one had helped, was no longer just a place to pass through. It became a meeting spot. A bench was added. A small plaque set into the stone path. No grand words, just 3 lines. A child spoke. One man listened. Everything changed. No names, no dates. Just truth. And every morning someone left a small teddy bear on the bench, fresh, clean, a symbol, not of pity, of promise. Clara healed, not just her body, her spirit. She started a support group for families who'd been torn apart by lies, by betrayal, by systems that looked away. She didn't yell, she didn't blame, she just said, I was ignored. I don't want that to happen to anyone else. And people came. Mothers, fathers, grandparents, kids, all carrying their own silent pain, all needing to be heard. Alexander didn't return to his old life. He sold the mansion, moved into a quiet house near the edge of town. Simple, warm, full of light. He kept his company, still signed deals, still made decisions that moved markets. But now he did it from a home office, with Daniel doing homework at the table beside him. Some nights after dinner they'd sit on the porch. No TV, no phones, just talking about school, about dreams, about the stars, and sometimes, when the wind was just right, Daniel would go quiet, stare into the dark. Alexander knew he was remembering. The cold, the fear, the sound of his mother's voice, faint and weak from inside the bin. So Alexander would shift closer, put an arm around him, say nothing, just be there, because presence mattered more than words. One evening, Daniel looked up. Dad. Yeah. Do you ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't come back? Alexander didn't answer right away. He looked out at the trees swaying in the breeze. Then he said, every day. He turned to Daniel. And I don't mean the part where we saved your mum. I mean the part where I almost didn't care. Daniel frowned. What do you mean? I mean, Alexander said, voice low, I had everything, money, power, a life that looked perfect from the outside, but I was empty. I walked past people every day, didn't see them, didn't hear them. And if I hadn't turned back that night, I'd still be that man. He paused. But you changed me. Daniel blinked. Me? You, Alexander said. You made me remember what it feels like to be human. The boy didn't say anything, just leaned into him, and for a long time they sat like that. 2 hearts, 1 family, not because of blood, because of choice. Clara visited often, sometimes with soup, sometimes with stories, sometimes just to sit. She never called Alexander a hero. She'd say, you were just kind, that's all. But he knew kindness wasn't small. It was the loudest thing in the world when it showed up at the right moment. One afternoon, she handed him a letter. From the hospital. The doctor who had lied, Dr. Evans, had been stripped of his license. The notary who forged documents, charged. The neighbors who lied under oath, publicly exposed. The system had cracked, but it had fixed itself because people spoke up. because one recording hidden in a child's toy had forced the truth into the light. Alexander read it, then folded it carefully, placed it in a drawer, not to forget, but to remember how fragile justice could be. That night he sat at his desk, looked at the USB drive, still in its plastic bag. He picked it up, held it in his palm, so small, so light, but it carried the weight of a life, of a mother's love, of a child's courage, of a man's redemption. He didn't need it anymore. The trial was over. The truth was known, but he kept it, not as evidence, as a reminder that the smallest things can carry the biggest change. A whisper, a tear, a teddy bear, a decision to stop, to listen, to care. Weeks passed, then months. Life settled, not perfect, never perfect, but real. One morning, Daniel came downstairs, holding a school project, a poster board, painted in bright colors, at the top in bold letters, "My hero." Below, a drawing, a tall man in a suit, kneeling, a small boy beside him, pointing at a trash bin. Underneath, Daniel had written, "He believed me when no one else did." Alexander stared, couldn't speak, his throat tightened. He looked at Daniel, the boy smiled. "I had to pick someone, and you were the first person I thought of." Alexander pulled him into a hug, held him long. When he let go, he said, "You know what? You're my hero too." Daniel laughed. "I didn't do anything." "You did everything," Alexander said. "You taught me how to see." The school held an assembly. Daniel was asked to speak. He didn't want to, but Clara and Alexander sat in the front row. He looked at them, took a deep breath, walked to the microphone. The room fell silent. "I was scared," he began. "For a whole day and night, I didn't eat, I didn't sleep, I just waited. Because I knew my mum was still alive. I knew she was counting on me." He paused. His voice wavered. "But no one believed me. Not until one man did." He pointed at Alexander. "That man. He didn't know me, he didn't have to care, but he did." The students listened. Some wiped their eyes. "Now I know," Daniel said, "that it doesn't matter how small you are, your voice matters. If you keep speaking, someone will hear you." He stepped back. The room erupted, not just claps, standing ovation. Even the teachers stood, because they saw it. Not just a story, a lesson. That courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's a whisper from a child in a dirty square with a torn teddy bear. Years later, people still talked about it, not as a crime, not as a scandal, as a turning point. The day the town learned to listen. And Alexander, he never gave speeches, never wrote a book, but if you asked him now what he was most proud of, he wouldn't mention deals or wealth or power. He'd look at Daniel, at Clara, at the life they'd built, and say quietly, "I chose to stay." And that choice, it echoed in classrooms, in courtrooms, in homes where parents now knelt to meet their children's eyes. In every moment someone decided, "I will listen. I will believe, I will act." Because the world doesn't change all at once, it changes one person, one decision, one heart, at a time, and sometimes all it takes is one man stopping his car, turning around and saying, "Tell me what happened." That's where everything begins, not with a bang, not with fame, with a simple act of seeing someone, really seeing them, and choosing without hesitation to care. And if you're watching this, maybe you've had that moment where someone didn't walk away, or maybe you've been the one who needed to be seen. Either way, remember this. Your voice matters, your pain matters, your truth, it's worth fighting for, And if no one's told you today, you are not alone, someone is listening. And if you're the one hearing a quiet cry, don't turn away, lean in. Believe, because you might not just save a life, you might save a soul. And create a ripple. That never stops. Thank you for staying with this story. If it moved you, if it reminded you of something important, share it. Not for views, not for likes, but because someone out there needs to hear it, and they might just find it because you cared enough to pass it on. Take care of yourself, look out for each other, and never forget the smallest act of kindness can be the bravest thing you ever do. It started with a cry no one wanted to hear. A boy, 6 years old, dirty, cold, standing in front of a trash bin, screaming that his mother was inside. People walked by, they shook their heads, they called him crazy. They said he was lying. And one man, Alexander Knight, almost did the same. He had everything, money, power, a life built on control and logic. But in that moment something cracked, not because of proof, not because of facts. Because of a look, a pair of eyes, wide, wet, broken, staring at him like he was the last hope. And for the first time in years, Alexander didn't think, he felt. He turned back, and that one decision, it changed everything, because inside that bin wasn't garbage. It was a woman, beaten, drugged. Left to die, Clara, Daniel's mother, and the man who put her there, her own brother, Marcus. A man who smiled to the cameras, cried on TV, and twisted the truth so well the world believed him instead of her. The system failed. Social services took Daniel. The court almost dismissed the case. The media painted Clara as unstable. But Alexander didn't walk away. He fought, not with rage, with proof. A USB drive, hidden in a teddy bear, sewn in by a mother who knew she might not survive. A recording. Her voice, Marcus's voice, cold, cruel, confessing everything. Sign it, or you'll die in the filth. That recording didn't just expose a crime, it exposed a lie. And when Daniel stood in court, small, trembling but strong, and said, "I saw it, I heard it," the room didn't just listen, it broke, because the truth doesn't always come from experts. Sometimes it comes from a child, and sometimes justice doesn't start in a courtroom. It starts when one person says, "I believe you." Marcus got 20 years. Clara got her life back. Daniel got a father, not by blood, by choice. And Alexander, he got something he never knew he was missing: purpose. Not from boardrooms, not from deals, from love, from family, from the quiet mornings on the porch, from the hand he held, from the boy who now called him Dad. The town changed too, no longer a place of silence, but of memory. A bench, a plaque, a teddy bear left every morning. A reminder: listen, believe, act, because evil doesn't always wear a mask. Sometimes it wears a smile, and courage. It doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's a whisper from a child, in the cold, with no one left to trust. This story isn't just about a rescue. It's about what happens when we stop ignoring the quiet cries around us, when we stop assuming, when we stop walking away. It's about the power of one moment, one decision, one act of kindness that refuses to look the other way. And if there's one thing to take from this, it's this: you don't need to be rich, you don't need power, you don't need a title, you just need to care. Because the smallest choice, to stop, to listen, to stay, can save a life. It can heal a heart. It can change the world. So next time you hear a voice that sounds too small, too scared, too desperate, Don't turn off your ears. Lean in, believe, and if you can, fight, because someone's survival might depend on it. Thank you for being here. If this story moved you, share it, not for views, but because someone out there needs to hear it. Maybe they're the one crying. Maybe they're the one who needs to be believed. Either way, your attention matters. Your compassion matters. And the world, it needs more people like you. Take care. Stay kind. And never underestimate the power of simply showing up.